And we're back. We're here. We're right back in here. And we are talking about what's going on in our deep dive segment. I lost my glasses. Oh.
Jinkies.
I guess I'm just going to go without, jinkies. Welcome back. And as always, it's time for our deep dive. And this week, we're diving deep into what makes open worlds so special to gaming. Open worlds have seemingly become a natural step for any franchise, but how did this become so critical to gaming? Let's start by answering the big question. What is an open world game? In video games, an open world game is a mechanic of using a virtual world that a player can explore and approach objectives freely, as opposed to a world with a more linear, structured gameplay. While many games have used open world design since the 1980s, the implementation of Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto 3 is widely known to set the standard and is what has been used since. Games with open or free-roaming worlds typically lack level structure like walls or locked doors or invisible walls and the more open areas that prevent players from venturing beyond them. The only bounds are of an open world game or the player will be limited to our geographic features like vast oceans or impassable mountains. Kev, why do you think GTA 3 is known as the game that set the standard for open world games?
Because they're the ones that do it. They're the ones that do it and get it right, as far as I'm concerned. And like the 3D graphic era, right? Like this is the first open world game I played. I mean, I guess you could say like Mario 64 was technically open world, but it was open world in which you could have just this one world and where you jump to other worlds through like the paintings and stuff. But GTA was like the first true open world game in which the entire world and you have it and you did missions in, like it didn't take you anywhere else, right? Like I think that's the difference. A lot of areas were more like lobbies, like open lobbies, and then you go into whatever the world is or the mission was or whatever it is. GTA and all that stuff was in-house, and I think that's why they set the standard for it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that it was one of the most massively consumed open world games. I don't know if it was necessarily the what you can go pinpoint as the first one, but I think it definitely was the biggest and the most popular first one. And so after that, I think people just followed suit. You know, right. Jake, what do you think it became the standard?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it has to be because of just how free you were in that game, right? Like, you know, and it was just essentially one of the first games I know where you could just get in a car and drive anywhere within the city and do whatever. You didn't have to do the next story. The story, you know, like there was nothing really like, there were obviously like, you know, quest prompts, and you would be like, okay, well, I got to go over there and do a quest, but you could spend hours just fucking off at the beach. Right. you know, in Grand Theft Auto. And so like there was just so much craziness that you could do in that game, and it built into, you know, the future Grand Theft Autos, you know, like made it to where like now, or well, the future Grand Theft Autos all the way up until 5, which I believe is the last Grand Theft Auto they'll ever make ever. They're just going to keep building Grand Theft Auto online. Right. And so, but it's one of those things where Rockstar is just one of the goats when it comes to kind of like, you know, setting the standard for open world games.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when it first came out, they weren't called open world games, right? They're called sandbox, right? Sandbox style games. And I think that I remember that at the time, you know, you didn't have any online components. And so it was literally like, you know, you had your own sandbox that you could play and go in wherever you wanted to. With that said, though, you know, outside of GTA 3, are there any others that you would consider pioneers when it comes to open world gaming, Kev?
Pioneers. I saw the chat. Fattest Sack said Shenmue. I think that's a fair take. Yeah, Shenmue for sure did that. I don't think it was as expansive as GTA though, mostly because, you know, GTA you had vehicles. As far as pioneering it, I guess you could. It's hard to say other games outside of GTA. I mean, I want to say Red Dead and stuff, but they didn't really pioneer. They just did what GTA did with Cowboys.
It's all the same company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you had a bunch of like sort of carbon copies of that. Like what was it? True Crime, Streets of LA.
Yeah,
that's a throwback for some people. Yeah, I think Rockstar is really the pioneer in the open world,
the quintessential,
game,
for sure.
Yeah.
Jake, what about you? Do you think there's any other pioneers?
I definitely think Rockstar's a GOAT, between Red Dead, GTA, like those things kind of set the standard for open world games. But then you can't sleep on Bethesda. Fallout, Fallout New Vegas came out a very long time ago and is still a very good open world game to this day. The Elder Scrolls series have all been really good. I think as far as open world games are concerned, Bethesda really just kind of like helped set that. But as far as old school pioneers, Kev kind of touched on it with like Mario 64 and Donkey Kong 64. Nintendo really I would say to today's standards, those wouldn't be called open world games, right?
Nah.
But for the time, they were very much these vast open worlds. The fact that you could play around in front of Peach's castle and climb trees and find things and swim in water, or the fact that you could just do those kind of things that had never really been done before, especially in a Mario game. You were being dropped into singular levels where as you went, the screen, the level disappeared behind you.
Like time.
And you had time. These, like the Nintendo switching to Mario 64 and Donkey Kong 64 style of development really made it feel like, you weren't on a timer anymore and you weren't a platformer, even though you were a platformer. And there was just so much to explore. And I think that's kind of one of the telltale signs of the pioneers was they were exploratory games.
Sonic
it made you
as well.
Sonic Adventures, Banjo-Kazooie, baby.
Oh, shit, Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Kazooie did do that.
I mean, what about Zelda? Some of the first Zeldas, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask. I mean,
Ocarina of Time for sure.
Ocarina of Time. You could go everywhere.
You could say arguably, you could argue that Mario 64 or Donkey Kong 64 may not be as open world, but it's hard to debate like early Zelda Ocarina of Time as not being a pioneer for open world.
I'm going to throw one at you here, Dodd, and you may or may not agree, but what about Pokemon?
I mean, it wasn't. I don't think that the up until Sword and Shield, there was. I think one of the biggest things that distinguishes open world is a camera that's not static. And
that's true too. You can look around.
You can look around, and the storyline is not as linear. I think that those are two elements. And I think that they don't have to. You don't have to be 100% in each of them. You could still have a linear story and still be kind of considered. Especially when we look at those earlier open world games. But like the closer you get to the open world, like perfect mixture kind of thing, is those two of those elements. Probably a couple more as well. But that I think that those are big ingredients. And with that regard, I don't think that you could talk about the early Pokemon games, especially being that way. I think that they are very linear. You had to beat this row of trainers, and then you got to this gym, and then beat this row of trainers, and get to this gym.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Sword and Shield's the first one where you could beat a different gym. Like you could actually pick which gyms you wanted to beat in a way. It used to be, or is Sword and Shield?
No, it's still linear. It's still.
Is it still just completely linear?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, because
I haven't played it in so long. I felt like I was able to like go to somewhere else and beat something, or go to this one and beat that one.
See,
but I'm thinking post game.
I think there is one gym where you have this.
Sorry. No. I know exactly what I'm thinking, and I'm thinking in the post game when you're beating the twins that are like the princes or whatever, you can go to whatever gyms you want to beat the Gigamax fucking Pokemon wherever. You don't have to do those in a specific order, and so that's what I was thinking of. But that wasn't the actual gyms themselves.
Yeah.
So
But what a lot of people don't remember about GTA 3 is that the way like it was open world, but you had restrictions. Like you couldn't go to certain parts of Liberty City until you did a certain mission. Like it'd be like, oh, the bridge is out. So you can't go, like uptown or something. So.
They did have their limits until you finally made it to certain parts in the story to like unlock those in a way.
Right.
There's just going to be one guy. It wasn't
until like San Andreas to where it was like fully fleshed, wide open. Like San Andreas, you could literally do whatever the fuck you want. Like the first 30 minutes I spent in San Andreas was in the gym.
Yeah,
because I was at the clucking bell getting.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
there's one pissed off NPC in San Andreas that's just sitting at the junction waiting for just one fucker to unlock the character assignment so he can get across the fucking bridge and get to work. You know, someone needs to write a story about that NPC. Is that free, guys?
Waiting on like, I can't get into work because this dude hasn't decided to beat the fucking story missions yet.
Yeah, like, God damn it, go rob that gas station and get, you know.
Yeah,
I don't know what the storyline of San Andreas.
I did ride a bike for the first half hour I played GTA San Andreas, like just around the city, like just biked everywhere.
Yeah. That dude's just sitting up there on top of his car, like, what the fuck, man? Come on. He's like, oh,
it was actually the first GTA
BMX bike in the Grove Street.
Another limit to GTA 3 that, you know, like while it did set the standard, one of its limits, swimming. GTA San Andreas introduced swimming, and that was a fucking game changer, baby.
Yeah, it was. It really was. Yeah. You're dead as soon as you touch the water.
I hated whenever you touch the water and it'd be like wasted. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like that made no sense. But anyway.
Like, I feel like this is weird. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, some games like set the standard. Building open world games can be a massive undertaking, right? The development for these games is usually huge, meaning most of the time it's AAA studios trying to push the next big game. But if anything, we've seen time and time again that bigger doesn't always mean better. A common phrase online to describe a bad open world is as wide as an ocean, deep as a puddle. Jake, what do you think the opposite of GTA 3 is? What set open world games back?
Yeah. I thought about this one in No Man's Sky on launch. Like while that game ended up becoming, you know, a very, very kind of like good open world game, right? On launch, it was massive and it was filled with nothing. Yeah. Like there was so much to go to and nothing to see. Like the planets got so repetitive, and it felt like you just lived in this huge open sandbox game, but there was just nothing to do. Yeah, but I think one of the ones that actually may have set video games back is Superman 64. We were talking about the great open world games of 64.
Oh, God.
Superman 64 is not only one of the worst games ever made, but it's one of the worst open worlds ever made. Like the game itself made people think is 3D games
that hasn't been used ever again to make a video game franchise.
That's how bad it was.
Yeah. It was awful. Oh, I forgot all about that game. Ooh,
one of the worst open world games ever made.
To fly through rings, like none of that made sense. Like, what?
Yeah, the brilliant pink skies of Metropolis.
Yeah,
that was the sunset. Like
that was it. Yeah, this magenta just looks like your printer shit the bed in the magenta cartridge sky. Just that one shade. We don't even fuck with gradients. No. Yeah. Anyways, okay, Kev, what about you? Anything come to mind?
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about how awful Superman 64 was. It even had the nerve to have multiplayer. Like,
yeah.
Well, they thought I think the multiplayer was like you four people like riding around on carts or something. Like it wasn't like I don't even think you were Superman. It was like first person. You would zap each other with like a laser.
You were cleaning up weird after Superman. No,
no, I think literally that's what it was.
Or you're in like a superstore and you like the building's coming down and you're in a shopping cart and you have to avoid the debris while Superman just fucks the Zod.
And while he's just up there not breaking his neck, which I guess he could have done the whole time.
Anyway.
But I think
my family issues are now your building's problem.
It was car fighting. Yeah, Savage said it was car fighting, which is like so. It was like a twisted metal game inside of Superman 64,
but it was first person. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, Dad, I think one that missed the market. I'll use another game at launch that didn't do so well that was made better with updates is Sea of Thieves.
Yeah.
Like that game had so much,
and now I can play it. Ooh,
yeah,
you can. We can play Sea of Thieves, bro.
Sea of
Thieves on my
do
PC,
some
dog.
pirate shit. Fuck yes.
Yeah, fantastic now. But at launch, it was not that. I remember there's a YouTuber.
Oh, and we can play with Kev. It's cross-platform.
There you go.
Yeah, dude.
He had the expression of like empty sandbox, like we how they were called sandbox, but it's like a sandbox in it with nothing but sand, and that's pretty much what Sea of Thieves was.
It was
at launch. Like you didn't know what the fuck to do. Like there's no tutorial,
nothing.
There's no you don't know. Like there's really no objective. You're just like, okay, here you are with you by yourself maybe or your friends, and then you get on a boat and you're just trying to figure out what to do. But it's just this vast open sandbox, and there's nothing in there.
That game is
I
honestly, that game is one of the first games I ever played where I honestly felt like I was sucked into a spaceship and then just dropped off in the tropics and then just been like, have fun. And I was just like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Do I drive boats?
Yeah.
How do I, there was nothing. And so I've heard that it's gotten better though.
And I think that's it for sure has. I played with Sax like a little while ago, and we got destroyed by the Kraken. But
we're all gonna go ham. It's gonna be a big pirate crew.
But I think what's a bad indicator of a open world game is when it's only fun if you make it fun. Like that's not how a game
that's a good one
supposed to be.
Yeah,
and that's kind of like how Sea of Thieves was, No Man's Sky. Some of these games are just like, it's innovative. We're going to do open world, but they don't put anything else in it, right?
You're
they just think the open world concept is the innovation in itself.
You're supposed to make the entertainment as the developer of this game. You're supposed to entertain me. You're not supposed to make something for me to find my own joy in.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
that's like someone like showing you like a TV show writer showing you a black screen. Like, imagine what the characters will do.
You know what? Look at this nice screen. It's beautiful, right? Now picture
close your eyes and we're
a good show.
Tell you a story, and you just picture what comes to your head the best, and then tell us how our CGI was.
But Kev,
afterwards,
honestly, I'm really surprised you didn't bring up the one that I thought you would.
Yeah, me too.
What's that?
Anthem.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I never even touched Anthem. I played the demo. I played the demo, saw the reviews, and I was like, I've seen enough. Because, and also too, it was a little bit of sour grapes because they basically killed Mass Effect Andromeda and that entire series to make Anthem, and then that game shit the bed. I'm like, I'm not going to support this. Like, if they make it good, maybe, but yeah,
I can see the sour grapes there, especially with you as such a big Mass Effect fan.
Mass Effect fan, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well,
yeah.
Some people believe that open world games are just a draw in, a jump the shark tactic to get people to play, get people into playing a game. Do you guys have any examples of games that didn't come as advertised but may have redeemed themselves? Kev?
Yeah, Ghost Recon Wildlands, and I already said enough about Sea of Thieves. That's one, but Ghost Recon Wildlands was similar to that, as is with most Ubisoft titles.
Yeah,
it comes out at launch, and it's like you see it on E3, you're like, "Whoa, this game looks amazing! It's trailblazing, it's innovative, these graphics, it's ray tracing," and it comes out, and it's just vanilla ice cream.
Yeah,
and you're promised the Cosmopolitan,
right?
Is it Neapolitan?
Yeah,
or the Ben and Jerry's with the caramel,
or the Ben and Jerry's, half
and then you
baked
get the heated up Samoas, and then you throw those on top, and then you mix them.
But that was Ghost Recon Wildlands, right? Like, it was a game, and this was true open world. Like, there was no lineation to it. You could go after the main head honcho, El Jefe narcotic boss from day one. You probably get destroyed, but you could do it.
Yeah.
But the problem was that was it, right? Like, you could do that with your friends and stuff, and it was fun, but it got boring. And I stopped playing the game because what I was doing at first was I was going around, and you would find, like, there's a trick, like, you go to an undiscovered area, you'd find some intel, and then it'd show you where, like, weapons are, or like weapon upgrades. And then once you did all that, like, there was really no point to playing the game anymore because the story wasn't that great. And that's kind of what happened. But what they did do was the multiplayer was apparently amazing. I never really got a chance to play it because I only played it for the single player, and the single player in the co-op campaign. But the multiplayer again is a different beast because that's not open world at all. That's just like battle arena stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's one game that comes to mind as far as like an open world game that came out shit the bed and then was made somewhat better. But I don't know if they made it better. They just made the multiplayer better, so I don't think that counts.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking about that there, Kev, is that the battle royale kind of battle style is kind of an open world approach to multiplayer gaming, or probably one of the most open world-esque kind of approaches to multiplayer gaming that we've had. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about with particularly this topic is the fact that open world does seem like a step for certain games, certain franchises. We talked earlier, Kev, you said, Pokemon. Does Pokemon count as one of the first open world games? I don't think so. And I think that Sword and Shield got it closer to that. But we see more. We keep on seeing steps that are closer and closer and closer to open world stuff. We had the wild area as a kind of one improvement there, and we had now it looks like the entire game with this new Pokemon Legends Arceus is going to be even more open world, where we have even more control, and elements of those open world games are now becoming more and more critical to these franchises. I mean, we talked about earlier Zelda being a pioneer for open world games, but we also look at Breath of the Wild as one of the first really truly open world Zelda games, because it's become a kind of a purity test of things. Why do you think that this has become such a kind of now a coming of age step for certain video game franchises, or just video game franchises in general?
I think the bigger a game gets, the more people want to
explore it.
Explore it. And they want to be that character, and they want to do as much as they can in that world. I think that's like the Dragon Age games are a good example of games that are open world games that get more and more open world and bigger with each expansion. And it's just one of those where, and even other games where they didn't start as open world, like Mario, and now Odyssey felt like such a great open world experience, or even Zelda. Zelda was like a scrolling kind of like dungeon game, and then and now it's Breath of the Wild. I think is the Breath of the Wild to me. If you Google what is an open world game, it should go start at Breath of the Wild. This is the perfect one, and then go from there.
Completely.
And so it's just one of those where like. I think it's the evolution of a game, because people get so like enthusiastic about the game, and it's like backstories, it's lore, it's characters. They want to learn more, they want to play more, and they want to be more. And so that open world games give you the ability to do all those things. Yeah, and I think that goes back to one of the critical elements that I was talking about earlier in defining what it means to be a good open world. And I think that the one of the reasons why Breath of the Wild to me is such a quintessential example of open world is the two elements that we talked about earlier. It does really, really well with, which is the modular storyline, right? It's not a streamlined storyline. You can go do this dungeon first, or you can do that dungeon first. Doesn't matter. It's just can be Ganon with day one.
Yeah. If you want to just fucking charge the castle, you can,
if you can,
you should.
If you can, you shouldn't. But
I've seen some streams where people got it done, and it's fucking impressive.
The speed runs, you have to, you have to. Well,
you got fucking Link fighting Ganon in game with a stick and no help from the four, like the fucking whatever, the divine beast. You know what I mean? Like, so you get no help from the divine beast, and you basically don't have any of the best weapon or armor in the game, and they still somehow whoop.
I'm still struggling to beat the Bokoblin, so I'm staying away from that until I get all four.
Yeah,
exactly.
But you have that modular component to the storyline, right? And then you also have this free, unrestricted view and camera space that you can go through and explore. And that really did feel like a very, very open kind of world game. But to be arguably the rotational camera and all that kind of stuff, Ocarina of Time had that. Fucking Twilight Princess had that. All these other places had those same things. You just had a very linear story that you had to follow, where the level 86 bosses are going to be up at the top of this mountain because you're supposed to be there 3/4 of the way through the storyline and not right off the bat. And Breath of the Wild did definitely change that, and so that's why a lot of people do refer to it as like the first open world Zelda game, because it follows that aspect a lot. But Zelda is not the only one that kind of still followed that kind of timeline too. You can look at Metal Gear Solid as well. You went from Metal Gear Solid all the way up to Metal Gear Solid 4. You have a very linear kind of gameplay where you still have some options to explore within the map, just like we were talking about with Jedi Fallen Order, but it's still a very linear storyline. But when you get to Metal Gear Solid 5, boom, big ass open world for you to explore and go roam around it and do whatever you want. So it just go ahead.
That is an example of, like, if you're looking at examples of bad open world games, Metal Gear Solid 5 is a bad open world game.
Oh yeah, I think that the Metal Gear Solid works a lot better as streamlined.
Yeah.
You know,
some games do.
Yeah. And I think that when we're talking about Jedi Fallen Order earlier, you know, one of the things is that I kept on mentioning, and I'll say it again, is that it would try to be open, pretended too much to be open world when it was clearly it's a very linear story.
Yeah.
The pretending
they tried to market it as open world when it's not.
Right. The pretending aspect of it is really, I think, what hurts that the most. Whereas it being just being streamlined is not necessarily all that bad in of itself. Like, it was a fun game to play.
Yeah,
probably should be streamlined because it's a Jedi's coming of age story, so it probably should have a pretty fucking linear line. You probably shouldn't have 6 different deviations for how this Jedi can grow up, especially if you were creating a character.
Well, like the joke you made, kind of like, it's the best Star Wars movie I played, right?
Exactly.
It's kind of one of those things where, like, even God of War, which is a great open world game, still kind of pushes you into a direction because it wants to tell a good story. You know?
Yeah, it's hard to do both.
And yeah, it is. It's very hard to do both. I think that's where some games, like even Cyberpunk, you know, kind of like struggled, where some of the endings are just okay and some are good, you know, like, but there's no true ending that's really like, because when there's 5 different endings, like, you know, when people write movies, they don't typically go, I'm going to write 5 endings for this movie, and then we're just going to work from there. You know what I mean? Like, that's not.
And then we got to shoot them 7 different times for custom character skins.
Exactly. And so it's one of those.
Even in like Red Dead Redemption 2, it's funny. Like, that's like, it's like that. It's hard to tell a story not have a linear gameplay, because, like, for instance, in Red Dead Redemption 2, I went to like Saint Denis by accident, like early on, and then in the story to the point where the whole gang's going to Saint Denis and everyone's acting like we've never been here. I'm like, I was here like yesterday. I don't know.
My author Morgan's going like, I ain't never seen Saint Denis, and I'm like, Author, you were here yesterday. Like, what are you?
You bought clothes from here,
bro. We were just fucking around in Saint Denis. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, we talked earlier, some may have dropped the ball. We can all agree that open world games is an amazing innovation in gaming, and the ability to do whatever in a game was basically unheard of at one time, and we got to be the lucky generation to guinea pig, you know, its coming of age. And that's fantastic. Now, but when it's done right, open world games are usually some of the largest success stories in gaming. What are some games that you guys think got it right when building open world experiences, and why? Jake, we'll start with you.
Well, my favorite open world game, besides Breath of the Wild, and I think Breath of the Wild is just, like I said, I think it's kind of like the definition of an amazing open world game. Like, it's you know, and the only reason why is because fucking play Breath of the Wild. You'll know why. Like, it's just everything is done seamlessly. But besides Breath of the Wild, The Witcher 3 really nailed that shit. It's probably one of my favorite open world games. You know, nothing's really linear about it, but the story's kind of like, no matter what you beat first, you're going to get a good story out of it. It's a great story overall for a game that doesn't really have to go in order, you know. Assassin's Creed, especially Valhalla, Odyssey, and some of the newer ones kind of felt like The Witcher 3, but they felt like that because they were trying to catch The Witcher 3, which came out way before they did, you know, like, and so it's one of those things where Witcher 3 just kind of like set the tone, and, you know, that's CD Projekt Red. That's why there was so much hype for Cyberpunk. Like, people are like, why was there so much hype?
I forgot.
Yeah, no, that's the biggest thing. Like, everybody forgot the reason why we were hyped about fucking Cyberpunk was because they made the fucking Witcher. Yeah. And so Fallout 3 and Skyrim, also both, you know, Bethesda games that came out around the same time. I think they kind of like did open worlds really good with, you know, they have solid stories that are fun to, you know, kind of play to completion. They give you the options to make you feel like, you know, you have these different choices that will lead to different endings, but you don't really have to do anything in order, right? You know, it's one of those things where, like, I can either become the Dragonborn, or I can go chop fucking wood for 3 days and no one's gonna, you know, know any lighter in the Skyrim world. And so, you know, those are just some of the games that come to my mind when I think of, like, what, you know, were games that I just got lost in, you know, and enjoyed looking around. I probably spent more time cooking in Breath of the Wild than I did actually playing, like, some other games, like actual stories. You know, and it's just because, like, what kind of game allows me just to walk up to fire pits and throw things in it and see what happens? You know, I know. I love that cooking sound, and you're just sitting there with your little pot. So much fun.
Yeah,
it's kind of dance
so
to it.
satisfying.
Yeah, no, I think that there's some fantastic examples. Kev, before I get into mine, do you have some examples of games that just got it right when it comes to open world games?
Yeah, for sure. Red Dead Redemption 2, Watch Dogs 2. I know Jake said Assassin's Creed. I want to throw specifically Assassin's Creed Black Flag. That was
So
super
fun.
open world. Yeah. Open seas, actually.
Open sea game. Yeah.
Yeah. Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that because I think a lot of people don't appreciate what Spider-Man did for open worlds
and
superhero video games.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was the first game where you could just like be a superhero in an open world. And that ultimately led to probably the greatest superhero series, Batman Arkham.
Yeah.
The Arkham series, especially while some of them are a little like, I think Arkham Knight felt the most open world, or was it Arkham City, right? Or is it Arkham
City?
Yeah, Arkham City.
Arkham Knight was like
Arkham Knight, I think, was the most open world for sure, because that was the one where you had the Batmobile, and I remember you got this really awesome Batmobile that could go super fast and upgraded all these things so that you could do the Batman races and stuff like that. But then
it had weapons, but somehow didn't kill people.
Yeah, it had weapons that didn't kill people somehow. Like, he just has, a fucking.
They were beanbags.
Yeah, beanbags out of a chain gun. That's how they did it. I don't know. I don't know how that works. A lot of fucking beanbags, fucking putting Beanie Baby out of fucking business. Anyways, you'd always
run those back.
That was the thing, though. I always fucking would would be flying around and I want to get somewhere, and I'm like, but I just want to dive bomb and fly like I would in fucking Arkham City, where you just go off the top of this building and.
Oh my god!
Yeah, that shit was fun.
But it made it so that again, that was a sandbox, but it was more of a playground, because the reason you were incentivized to explore the open world was for all the Easter eggs and side missions that you could only find if you explored the world, like the city. Yeah.
And it really, Spider-Man 2, I think, is a great example of one of those games that did kind of put those innovations, because superhero games were kind of all, because they became such a quintessential one, that became kind of the model for a lot of superhero games going after theirs, and they were always sandbox style. They always had those little side missions that you could pursue, and that built along to the storyline. They weren't not a big part of the storyline. And sometimes you could do stuff like Sax mentioned. You had to do all the Riddler missions in Arkham Knight. But that was the only one that you had to do all of the Riddler quests to be able to even beat the Riddler. You had to beat the Riddler, and the first one you had to get all of them. But it was also very unsatisfying, because you just hear him over the loudspeaker kind of thing, and you don't actually see him. But the Batman Arkham games and superhero games in general, I think, did a ton for open world. So I think that's a fantastic point. And Assassin's Creed, Black Flag, Sea Shanties. I mean, that was. I think that one does go up there with Breath of the Wild as one of the greatest open world games out there, just because it's just what a fantastic game. I think we've simped over Black Flag plenty on this show before. I think we made our opinions on that pretty clear.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that'll about wrap it up for our deep dive. But we've got plenty more for you guys, including our top Zen.